All right, so I'm here again in Jerusalem. Now, today let's continue and we'll talk about the time of the Second Temple. We're talking about Ezra and Nehemiah, New Testament all the time, all the way until the Romans actually destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. Now, we talked about what Jerusalem looked at the time. When Nehemiah rebuilt it, it was basically just the city of David, a sort of Italy boot-shaped, almost narrow part that's south of the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount with the where the Golden Dome is right now, that's where the temple used to be, is of course the northernmost part. Eventually this expanded and it grew mostly northwards and westwards. Why exactly? I don't know. To the east you have the Mount of Olives that's sort of blocking, and on the other side of the Mount of Olives you don't really want to build either because it's just desert out there. So Jerusalem expands and expands northwards, and the area that's today the city of David, that's outside of the walls of today, that was inside the walls the entire time of Jesus, the entire time of the Romans and the Greeks. But it might have been more of a slum and more of a poor area, the original part where it's the older buildings. Well, they would build the newer buildings in the newer parts. We don't really know for sure, but eventually Jerusalem expands and it includes pretty much of what we today see as the old city. Now, at the time of Jesus, people who lived in the Galilee, when they wanted to go to pilgrimage to Jerusalem, they would normally go east into the Jordan Valley. They would pass the Jordan River and they would walk in what is today the Kingdom of Jordan along the Jordan River southwards. Then they would cross the Jordan River again around Jericho, just north of the Dead Sea, and then they would walk from there through the desert until they reached Jerusalem. So you can imagine that they would probably see Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. They would see the Mount of Olives in the distance when they walked in the desert until they finally reached the Mount of Olives. They would walk up on the Mount of Olives, and from there they would see Jerusalem. Now, when Jesus came to Jerusalem, he was not living inside Jerusalem. He was staying with his friends Martha and Maria and Lazarus in Bethany. Now, Bethany is what is today the Palestinian city of Azariah on the West Bank, on the east, and it's right next to the Jewish settlement of Male Adumim. It's a beautiful place, but you can really see the Mount of Olives from there, from the other side. So, and he would just walk from there to Jerusalem every single day. Today you should not be walking there, but also it's desert. But anyway, now, right around where I'm standing right now is also called the city, the area of the mountain of bad advice, or something like bad counsel or something like that, because there's a tradition that says that in this area is where the high priest who sentenced Jesus to death. I'm not sure that's true. It is true that they found Caiaphas' grave in this area. It's a bit further to there, but they did find Caiaphas' grave here, so it's possible, I suppose. But nevertheless, now if you look to you see the wall of Jerusalem. To the right, you have this little area that is not built, that's just going down into a valley and then back up again. Now that valley is the Kidron Valley. On the other side of that, you can see the Gethsemane garden. There's a couple of churches there commemorating that this is where Jesus was. This is where they took him, and they took him into Jerusalem to be trialed, and then he was taken to Golgotha. Now, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is probably where Golgotha was, is a bit hidden behind the building, so it's a bit more to the left. It was outside of the city at the time of Jesus. Later, after Jesus' death and resurrection, Herod, not Herod, it was someone later, but they expanded the walls of Jerusalem to go even a bit further north, and it also expanded that. But eventually, the Romans came in 70 AD, they destroyed everything, and then they rebuilt a pagan city on the ruins of Jerusalem, which they called Aelia Capitolina. If you come to Jerusalem today and you see ancient Roman structures and Roman pillars, I'm very sorry to break it to you, but it's not from the time of Jesus, because the Romans ruined everything. What you see there is remnants of the Ilia Capitolina, the pagan city that the Romans built on the ruins of Jerusalem after 130 actually, because they ruined it once in 70 AD and they ruined it again at another revolt in 130 AD. So that's almost 100 years later than Jesus. But what more do we see here from the time of Jesus? Well, we have the temple itself, of course, which we know that where we know that Jesus was teaching. And if you see on the southern edge of there, it's a wall now, but right, that used to be the wall that went in, that was inside of Jerusalem. That wall was the covering basically the temple, and people would enter it through gates. And there are the steps that lead up to those gates are still there. What's special about those steps? Well, they were so central that anyone who went to Jerusalem would go on those steps. So those steps are actually the only place that we can say with 100% certainty that Jesus has definitely been walking on these stairs. And that's pretty amazing. There's a legend, which I don't know is true, which might be wrong, is that Neil Armstrong was walking on those steps and said, "It's more exciting being here than being on the moon." I can't promise that that's true though. Nevertheless, what more can we say? Well, we have the Via Dolorosa, is a street inside of the old city right now. It's the traditional way where people think that Jesus walked with his cross, because it goes from where Pilate would have sentenced him to death to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the probably original Golgotha is. I have no reason to doubt it. It looks about to be right. The archaeology that you can dig sort of checks out. It's very possible. That Via Dolorosa starts at the Lion Gate at the eastern side of Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, that could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll write it somewhere here in the area to correct myself. But that's it basically. When it comes to the walled part of Jerusalem, that's as big as Jerusalem ever gets. At the time after Jesus, before the Romans come and ruin it, the walls of Jerusalem are huge. They include the city of David that's south of Jerusalem, and they also include parts that are north of Jerusalem. They have found parts of that wall within the area that is today the city's the area of Sheikh Jarrah. So when it comes to walls, that's as big as Jerusalem has ever been. However, today, of course, it's a lot bigger, but the walls are still just the old city, and the walls that are built today are actually smaller than they were in Roman times. So next time we're going to talk about what happened after 70 AD, what happened when the Roman Empire became Christian, and what happened when the Muslims come and started to rule here, and how did things go on from there.